Oh. Inside. Inside.
This is why I didn't volunteer for this job. Okay, so we're online. We're live. Welcome back. Are we in that camera?
Oh.
Welcome back. What you missed, we just found out where everyone who's attending today is from. We have people as far away as Terrace and the Kootenays, of course from the island. And I understand online we have a party, a streaming party happening in Prince Rupert.
Prince George.
Prince George.
And I believe there's
party.
one on
Brilliant
the island.
idea. Brilliant idea. Thank you for being with us today. I'm going to hand the microphone over to Tracy, who's going to introduce our next speaker and special guest.
Thank you very much. So I'm really excited to be able to introduce Minister Fleming today, who was able to come and address us. He signed up at the last minute to come, and I really appreciate you making the time, because we've been trying to get him to come for a while. So I don't know how many of you know this, but I knew the minister back in university days. You see the scared look on his face? So actually, I attended a few parties with him. For the year 2000, I went to a party at him and his partner's house with my then 6-year-old, who's now 25. Good times. And I know I have pictures, but I didn't bring any today. But I do have some good stories. But I'm not going to tell any party stories. I have something to share, though. So I actually met the minister when we ran against each other. Easy, he doesn't even remember. For Director of Finance at the University of Victoria Student Society. So I lost. I know you're surprised. But it was during this campaign that I learned a lot about who the minister is. There was a third person running, and I can't remember if this was during a debate or if it was in the local student paper, but what this other candidate did is made some disparaging and sexist remarks about me, along the lines of, do you really want a barmaid in charge of the finances for the society? Now, Rob was my opponent. He didn't need to say anything. Could have been beneficial for him at the time. You know, times are different in the 90s. But the way he responded was that he thought that being a single parent who runs a business was probably excellent experience with good fiscal management, actually. And I'm paraphrasing, I don't know, it's been over 20 years. That's kind of what he said, I think. But like I said, it told me a lot. And he wasn't about to let a statement like that stand. And that was important to me. And so, you know, it gave me a lot of belief in his integrity through his political career. That political position led to where he is today. And it's my great pleasure to introduce my friend, Minister of Education for BC, Rob Fleming.
Why don't I just use this one?
You didn't know, just turn one off and turn the other one
Oh,
on.
is that what I do?
That's it. Here, let me this one off first. Yep.
This one is on.
Thank goodness someone knows.
Yeah, thank God you're running the show here. Well, thank you so much for the introduction, Tracy. I thought that was going to go in an entirely different direction. Really appreciate how you brought that around there. Very, very kind of you. And I have so many things to say about Tracy. You know, and I'm not going to start in the university days, but more recently as a outspoken parent and an advocate, and somebody who's just passionate about public education, and somebody who is a tremendous organizer, who has built in really 5 short years an incredible organization, BCEdAccess, with a wonderful board of volunteers, an entirely volunteer-run organization, to become a truly effective voice in public education today in British Columbia. That says a lot about Tracy and her colleagues and the drive and determination they have to make our school system better. And it particularly impresses me when they have kids that are no longer in the school system. And they're fighting for parents and families that are just becoming involved in the school system in times like now. And I really, really appreciate it. I can't say enough about you and your husband and your kids and the work that you're doing. And it's great to be here. And let me also just begin on behalf of the province of British Columbia, before I say a few remarks, just acknowledging the Coast Salish territory that we're on here. We thank First Nations people for the territories in which we gather here today. And I want to point out a couple other people who are responsible for me being here today, because they never take no for an answer. So Nicole Kaler is one. This is your traditional territory too, isn't it? Yeah. I mean, I met you at a DPAC meeting several years ago. We were involved in some fights around Surrey education, and we've kept up ever since. And you continue to do great work. And Chantel Morvay-Adams as well. Go Mission. First thing she said to me this morning, how's Mission Secondary going? So, excellent advocacy there continuously. Let me just say a few things about why inclusion matters for our school system. It has to be, and it is, really at the center of all of the education reforms that we're pursuing as a government. It is the major component of our student success agenda as a government. When you look at the BC education system, and indeed many jurisdictions in the world are looking at what goes right here, because we do well on many of the international benchmarks that exist. The school system in British Columbia over many, many decades has always been prided itself on the quality of its teaching, the excellence of teachers and support staff in the system. We have had universities that have enforced and trained teachers on high professional standards. We've had excellent administration, and we've had a lot of dynamism in the education system. And when you look at the scale of social change that has happened over the past number of decades, we have always relied on the public education system to really lead that kind of change. And it's no different today when you look at some of the programs around SOGI or inclusive education writ large. We are trying to change attitudes in society writ large by creating educated citizens who have a high degree of empathy and have learned in a school system that has taught them so much more than just the subject matter which they study. It's taught them how to be a contributing member of society and how to look out for one another. And that's no different today than it was in years past. But nevertheless, the fact of the matter is that the school system works very, very well for about 85% of kids. And there's far too many kids, even now, who fall through the cracks, who do not succeed, in the most general of terms, in the school system. And if we are going to do much, much better in that regard and really set our course and our vision to say that everybody must succeed in the school system, there are a number of things we have to do. The sad reality is that there are a lot of kids who come in kindergarten so far behind and disadvantaged from some of their peers, and the school system in some instances is not helping those kids become confident, strong learners in their earliest learning years. And that is, you cannot have a statement about greater unfairness than to say that a kid at 5 years of age really has lower life chances than another kid. And so our government's vision is really about correcting that, making sure that every kid is being as successful as possible in the school system. And that's going to take a lot of different interventions and efforts. It's going to take a lot of conversations and ideas being exchanged with organizations like this one. The Ministry of Education can be a little bit isolated at times. I've discovered in my short 18 months as the minister from what's going on in the field. And so my deputy minister, my assistant deputy ministers have been told to get out into a school. I try and be in a school setting once a week. It's not always possible when we're in the legislature, but to be able to meet teachers, meet inspiring parents, and see kids learning in the best possible way requires, I think, the Minister of Education to be in schools as much as possible. And I have to say that's truly the most enjoyable part of the job. And I think it's fair to say, and you all know this in this room, that we have a very uneven education system in British Columbia. We have areas of absolute excellence that people are flocking to come and see. People like Annie Kidder, and it's a real pleasure to speak after you this morning, and an honor, I must say, who would recognize that some of the things happening in different school districts in British Columbia are above and beyond what a lot of kids would expect to see in a different part of Canada. But we also have some areas where school districts, quite frankly, have to up their game a lot and learn from one another. And it's not about naming and shaming, it's about getting people in the room and having conversations about where we can strive for continuous improvement. And our job as government primarily is to set the right number of policies and the appropriate level of funding to make those kinds of improvements happen. So I just want to say that that is really at the heart of everything we're doing as a government. I'm very fortunate to be the Minister of Education with a pretty good level of peer support around the cabinet table. I think most of you know Mr. Richardson in the back of the room, and certainly know Carol James as the longest serving BC School Trustees Association president I think in British Columbia has ever had, who sits as the finance minister. That's a good thing for me. But also Premier John Horgan, who I think has shared his story with lots of parents in this room about being that kid who was headed for failure and dropping out of school, who got pulled back into the system. He had some trouble. His father died at a very early age. He grew up in what was then a rough part of Victoria, all that stuff. And if it wasn't for the public school system, he acknowledges every opportunity he has, he certainly would never have gotten to be where he is today. And therefore, it's important to him and all the members of our government that we invest in education as actually the strongest pillar of sustaining a prosperous economy and a socially just province going forward. There really isn't any other stronger intervention that we can make to the well-being of our citizens than investing in the next generations of people who are going to be innovators, who are going to be caring in our community, who are going to develop businesses or get skills that build a stronger, better BC. So that's at the center of everything we do. And we have had a very short period of time in government. I keep reminding the opposition members of that across the way. They're in this room somewhere. That's the gentlest heckle I've had. But I am proud to say that in just 18 short months, when you compare our brief record and the two opportunities through two budget cycles that we've had, the funding level for BC Education right now is $1 billion higher than their last fiscal year in office. Much of that is due to the heroic fight of the BC Teachers Federation. They deserve credit for that. But a huge part of that new funding that is flowing into school districts is due to the opportunities we've had as a government in a short period of time to make record levels of investment. At the same time that we're making significant investments in expanding post-secondary education seats, the largest expansion we've had in a decade and a half, and at the same time that we're trying to build a comprehensive universal childcare system where we have invested $1 billion over the next 3 years to make sure that more kids coming into our school system are not part of those vulnerability indexes that teachers take note of at their very earliest learning days. So we have made education writ large, not just K-12, a significant area for government's fiscal investment. And just in terms of supplemental funding, which I think parents in this room are particularly interested in, we've seen over $500 million now in our current 2019-20 budget, which I hope will pass the House when we get to that vote later this spring. That's an increase, I think, this year of $106 million. It's a 23% increase in supplemental funding for special needs learners since we assumed government. There is more to do, there's no question about that. I keep reminding people that we're making down payments all the time on getting it right. I'll say a few things about the funding model review in a minute, but we wanted to go into a funding model review with a strong record of funding enhancements under the current model that most of us have acknowledged over a long, long time is not a good model for British Columbia. Just the other day I wrote to superintendents to inform them that some of the categories of special needs learners in British Columbia will have additional funds attached to them, in some cases up to $3,600 per kid. And this is long overdue. This is the first substantial increase that I think some categories of special needs learners have had in almost a decade, 2008, 2009, something like that. We've also enhanced funding for rural education because the old geographic location funds had not been touched for a long, long time, and that was part of the school closures agenda that the previous government had. We're interested in keeping schools open in communities around British Columbia because we recognize how important they are to the vitality of a number of communities in rural BC. So boards are going to benefit from that this year. And actually, for the first time since 2006, every single school district in British Columbia, even those that continue to experience enrollment declines, will have funding increases this year. In some larger districts, it's in the tens of millions. So we're making progress. We're retuning the way we allocate funding to steer it towards the kids that need the most help and stopping the, I don't want to call it overfunding, but the directed funding towards kids who need the least amount of help that are quite successful on their own in the school system. And I think we need to keep doing that because we're in an entirely different situation now and looking ahead the next 10, 15, 20 years than where we've been over the last 10 or 15 years, primarily on a demographic level. We had a school funding model that was really designed for the political interests of a government that was managing enrollment declines. It was an ability to make significant and steep cuts into the education system. We are not in that position anymore. It's a great thing to have healthy enrollment growth in British Columbia, and we expect as we increase the number of family supports we have in British Columbia, and it becomes more affordable to have children, that we'll see that supported and enrollment growth continue well into the future. We certainly saw that in Quebec when they introduced universal childcare. People could suddenly afford to start families at the age at which they wanted to start their families, and they could afford to return to work in an orderly way, and all of those great things that we're trying to replicate in British Columbia. But as you know, hiring 4,000 teachers all at once, turning around a system that saw fewer teachers each and every year in the school system and hiring thousands more is not without its challenges. I have to say that some districts have done amazingly well in terms of hiring to their needs. We've done everything we can, although there's a few more things we can do to recruit internationally. I think Ontario presents a unique opportunity. I'm going to give you an autographed welcome mat to take back to your colleagues in Ontario, Annie. We've also been recruiting internationally, which is something that hadn't been done before, and it requires some coordination with our federal counterparts on the immigration side. And it requires us to put a lot of emphasis with the teacher regulation branch and the BC Teachers Council on making BC welcome, recognized credentials a lot faster, so that we don't have to see a contraction of French immersion programs, we don't have to see people languishing before they can get into a classroom to share their expertise with kids, and we'll continue to work on that. We know that the substitute teachers list has been depleted, and that's a real issue for a lot of parents in this issue because spring break is the time we all recover from colds, or in my case, I got a new one. But everybody gets colds in the school system, and we have seen, because of the substitute teacher problem, a lot of EAs and others pulled away from the kids that they're there to serve, to try and get the school community through the school day. And that's not right, and I just want to tell you that we are working with all of our education partners, QB, the BC Teachers Federation, BC Superintendents Association, principals and vice principals, to make sure that that those instances where that happens diminish each and every month and each and every year. And we have supported school districts in every way that they have asked to be able to alleviate that substitute teacher hiring pressure. And I expect that we will bargain some additional measures potentially with our friends in the Teachers Federation, quite frankly. We're coming to the table to exchange ideas. I know that bargaining by its nature is an adversarial relationship where partners give and take, but we are actually coming to have the table set to have discussions about how we can make sure that problems that have been persistent are problems that will be solved working together. And we're open-minded to any ideas that the teachers union has to get us there. The other thing we're doing around the teacher shortage is the Ministry of Education had never done this before. We've never actually directly funded teacher training education program spots in BC's universities, and we're doing that now. We've funded close to 200 already. That's in addition to the 1,900 or so that the Ministry of Advanced Education funds annually. But we've said the money has to be for specialist teachers. So it's going towards people who want to be educational psychologists. It's going towards opening up seats for Indigenous teachers who will work on working with that school population. French immersion is, of course, part of this as well, but all of the skill sets that have been in short supply, we've targeted additional spaces in BC universities, and some of those teachers are going to be available September 1st, 2019. So we're very happy about that. It's worked out incredibly successfully. Every time we open a new block of seats, we get 100% subscription. So we would be proud to announce with this organization and others further steps in that direction. The other thing that we're very interested in doing is hiring more educational assistants. They play a tremendously valuable role in supporting inclusion and working with diverse learners. And we're working with CUPE and other organizations to talk about how we can support that. Again, we go back to the discrepancy and unevenness in how districts do their business, what role education assistants play in the learning team at schools. In some districts, in some classrooms, it's probably the best way you could arrange it. In others, there's a lot of room for improvement. And again, it's getting districts together to learn from one another. I mean, that's the great thing about the education system writ large, is it is peer-based learning all the way. No matter what role you play in the school system, you learn best from those who do a job similar to yours. And that's what we're trying to encourage, is that kind of dynamic and discussion in the school system. We want to support professional development as well. So one of the things that we're discussing with the BC Teachers Federation and others is how do we get teachers who've been in service for a long, long time in their careers, they're excellent teachers, but they don't feel that they have had professional development training on inclusive education. They're not in a position to go back to school for whatever reasons, but they want to focus the professional development resources and potentially some new ones on being more familiar, to have better classroom and learning strategies for the kids that they work with. And you know, we have a table now on inclusive education where some of those ideas are coming forward. It's been a long, long time since we have actually had all the partners in the room to talk about inclusive education. You know, we really haven't changed a lot of things in the funding model. The old funding model speaks to this since the old mantra was integration. You know, we're in the 21st century now where inclusive education is off and running and flying very positively in many parts of the province, but not in others. And teachers want to be a part of that. They want to feel well supported naturally, and we want to help them get those additional supports. So let me say a few things about the funding model review. The first thing is we are taking the time to get it right. We recognize that this is a generational opportunity in British Columbia. The old model has been to nobody's satisfaction. Again, I looked at Chris Richardson. How many years in a row did you pass motions at the BC School Trustees Association condemning the old model? I certainly am sympathetic to some of the shortcomings. And the old model was imposed in 2002 for a variety of reasons. Learning success for students was not high among them. And in British Columbia, we have a chance to look at what other areas of the world are doing better than us. We have an opportunity to look at what classrooms are like in this day and age. We have an opportunity to align our new curriculum with a funding model that better supports kids. And quite frankly, we are open to any and all good suggestions that will get us there. We have nothing preset in terms of where we end up. We need to have a discussion about avoiding mistakes, because mistakes can be unintended if they're not examined properly before we make a shift. And we need ideas from people like yourselves to make sure that we're getting to where we want to go. I think everybody at the table has the exact same values. They support the direction that we're going in, but the devil is always in the details, and we have an opportunity to get those details right. I don't think we've ever had as consultative a process as the one that we're embarking on right now. First of all, when the independent panel was named, government surrendered control over the shape of that review. We said we wanted to gather information from every part of British Columbia, and indeed all 60 school districts contributed. We had over 350 participants that came out to the regional meetings of the independent panel review. We had hundreds of submissions that were written to the ministry, and then the panel was thanked for the work, and we realized that the next phase, and the most significant phase, is really around implementation. The panel's report makes 22 thoughtful, good recommendations, but they're incomplete. They suggest a direction, but they do not really give us the how to get there. And so we're going to take our time to get it right. There's what I have read from other parts of the world where they've looked at better, more sustainable education funding is if you mess up the implementation part, you're in big trouble. You're no further ahead. And as I say, these chances only come around once in a while, and we certainly, as a government, want to make sure that we get the outcome that we want. So I can't thank BCEdAccess enough. We've provided a seat at the table in all the working groups that we have that are looking at the 22 recommendations, and your input is going to be vital to make sure that we wind up with something that people are going to be enthusiastic about and happy about, and that solves some of the problems that have been known and discussed at length for a long, long time. What I also want to say too is that there are some people out there who naturally, there's a high degree of trauma in the BC education system that comes from a government that fought the teachers in court for 12 years and dismissed parent voices and was not a listening government in any way. There's a high degree of trauma and mistrust with the provincial government and our motives. And it's been suggested, for example, that the inclusive education working group that we have put BCEdAccess at the table is looking at eliminating assessments for kids. Not the case. That we are looking at reducing supports for kids. Completely untrue. So I appreciate your willingness to engage. The reality is we need your ideas, we need your participation in order to be able to make the case and get the job done to significantly boost the supports we have for inclusive education. And one of the things that has bothered me about the outdated funding model that we have in place today is that we have all kinds of data out there about kids who don't do well in school, and we have no supports for them at all. This includes kids with medical diagnoses, where there's no funding attached. It also includes kids in districts and parts of districts where you have a tremendous concentration of poverty and income insecurity. So we fund great organizations like the Help Project at UBC. We fund sophisticated socioeconomic data gathering about kids that we track from their, really from birth to adulthood, and we don't do anything with it. And it seems to me that we ought to incorporate the usefulness of that into a contemplated model on education. So I'll leave that aside because there's lots of discussions to have at the table. We're really just beginning on the implementation side, some of the discussions at the working group. Maybe I could just say a few things about the budget that help families. First of all, I'm really, really pleased that the capital budget is now getting to a level where it should be in British Columbia. One of the toughest things for the Ministry of Education to do is to clear up a huge backlog of seismic upgrade projects, for example, that were left by the previous government that promised a number of things and didn't deliver enough. Also, we are in a situation of growth now. We've got proliferation of portables in so many districts. That's not an ideal situation at all. So the budget we have today before the House, which again I hope will pass, is $2.7 billion over the next 3 years. This is a massive increase over where we were when we assumed government. It's going to allow us to finally address the backlog of projects and try and get ahead of the growth curve. So that instead of the public sector getting ripped off by developers buying land after a community like Surrey is already built out, and it happens way too much. We get the worst piece of land at the highest price. We'll be proactively acquiring sites, planning schools, and having them in place as the community grows. And that's what this budget will allow us to begin to do. And I'm really, really happy. We, in a community like Richmond, for example, we've announced more seismic projects in 18 months than the previous government did in 16 years. So, and stay tuned, in a month we'll have done triple what they did in 16 years. We've got a lot of projects with school districts being submitted right now to design new schools, to retrofit new schools, to build additions. And that's a good thing for kids because a lot of our schools are not at the level where they should be around accessibility, and when we build new modern schools, they are. Last thing I want to say about the budget is, I hope this is getting out there in the field, but we've just tabled the Child Opportunity Benefit Fund. This is the largest middle-class tax cut for families with kids ever in the history of British Columbia. $1,600 per kid if you have one kid, $2,400 a year. If you have 2 children, it goes up from there. I know you have 5, so. We count them all. But this is cash money back into the pockets of parents who struggle to support their kids in dance and sports and arts and music and all of those things, or simply buy clothes and a backpack and all the things that add up as costs before school starts. We'll have more to say about supplies in the schools, but this is a major initiative and the most efficient one we could do as part of our poverty reduction plan, but also as part of something that will reach into the middle class and help affordability in the communities around British Columbia. And that's on top of another middle class tax cut that is very significant and that will come into place in January 2020. We've eliminated the medical service premium. And for all those people who don't work at, for employers who pay that premium or self-employed, that's $1,800 a year. That's $150 a month for families. It's the most flat, outdated, regressive tax you can imagine. We're the last province in Canada to have this stupid MSP tax. And it's gone. So the only people who seem to be whining about it are the opposition and the Fraser Institute, but we're really happy about it. And the way we paid for it, by the way, was we got rid of that tax cut that they brought in that only applied to the top 2% of people who made over 200 grand. We think it's much better spent on people that are struggling to make ends meet and pay the bills and volunteer for our community organizations and work hard like you guys do and have a little bit of money, extra money back in your pocket. So I'll leave on that note, and I really want to thank you for the invitation to be here. It's wonderful to spend time with you. I know you have a fantastic conference agenda ahead of you. And I hope you learn lots, and I hope you'll be in touch with the ministry and share the ideas that come out of this weekend. And thank you again for the opportunity to say a few words this morning.
Thank you.
Did you get an opportunity to ask a question?
No, unfortunately, we didn't have that in the agenda to begin with. If we had time, I would put that in right now, but I cannot. My regrets.
Yeah, we are already way over time. I really apologize. Actually, you're not even gonna, you had coffee kind of at an odd time that we didn't plan to, so we kind of want, if you want a cup of coffee, grab it on the fly and go to your next.
I'll hang back
Yeah.
a few minutes, grab a coffee with you, and then I have to get to my next appointment.
So I just want to really thank you, Rob, for coming. I really appreciate it. Minister Fleming, God, I'm terrible. It's a hard habit to break. I really, really appreciate you making the time. And we got a little gift for you. You can have a look at it if you want. It's pretty cool.
It's photos, right?
It's nothing embarrassing.
Thank you. So just a couple housekeeping items before we go.